Welcome one more day to the channel. I'm Money Dynamo, and today let us unfold a narrative that mirrors a movie plot but unfolds in reality. Soon you'll grasp through simple animations the intricate functioning of the financial system in the United States and why it should concern you. Picture having a friend, let's name him Powell, who possesses the knack for producing money. Yes, just as you hear it, he can conjure money out of thin air. However, one day Powell begins to incur losses. How can this be feasible? Let's delve into the explanation, not before reminding you to subscribe and hit the bell to not miss any video. Powell is at the helm of the world's most influential bank, the Federal Reserve of the United States. Traditionally responsible for minting all the world's dollars, since 2022, they have been undergoing financial losses, a rarity last seen over a century ago, in 1916. You might wonder, how can someone capable of literally creating money lose it? Has Powell gone awry, gambling all his wealth in games of chance or volatile cryptocurrencies like Dogecoin? No, the answer is a tad more convoluted and concerns something called interest rates. Since March 2022, Powell has been striving to rein in inflation. Inflation occurs when prices of goods rise over time, often due to excessive money printing. To curb this, Powell has been upping something termed interest rates. Think of interest rates as the fee one pays for borrowing money. Lower rates imply cheaper borrowing, prompting individuals and businesses to spend more, potentially surging demand for goods and services. If demand surpasses supply, prices hike, fueling inflation. Conversely, elevated rates make borrowing costly. Consequently, people and businesses borrow less and spend less. Reduced spending lessens the demand for goods and services, generally deflating prices, aiding inflation control. However, by hiking interest rates, Powell inadvertently escalated the cost for the United States to repay its debts. National debt refers to the colossal sum the country owes. Since the pandemic's onset, this mountain has surged nearly 40%, currently towering at a staggering $33 trillion, beyond imaginable proportions. There's substantial debate on how to tackle this colossal debt. Certain economists assert that delaying repayment will burden future generations, while others argue this towering debt is merely an accounting maneuver, not as dire as it appears. The government wields the power to infuse or withdraw money from the economy. Its spending on infrastructural projects or public services injects money as salaries. Conversely, tax collection withdraws money. Overall, the government has withdrawn more than it has infused. Should the government aim for zero debts? Not necessarily. Debt is but a figure in accounting books. Eradicating this number wouldn't nullify the government's financial commitments. Let's shift focus to the Federal Reserve. By late July 2023, the Federal Reserve bore a debt of around $33 trillion, categorized into intragovernmental debt and publicly held debt. Of this, about $7 trillion was intragovernmental, a sum the government owes itself. The lion's share, roughly $25.7 trillion, belonged to the public. It doesn't imply each U.S. citizen owes a specific amount. Rather, it's money the government owes to people, insurance companies, mutual funds, pension funds, and even other nations in some cases. It borrows from these entities, issuing special IOUs term bonds, instead of directly seeking money. For instance, suppose you purchased a $10,000 Treasury bond from the government's website. In essence, the government owes you $10,000 and, in return, pays you interest. This falls under publicly held debt, as you, an average person, hold that money. Of the colossal $26 trillion the government owes, a portion constitutes the Federal Reserve's debt. And what exactly is this debt? Let's delve into the Federal Reserve's activities. When you've heard that the Fed prints money, it doesn't mean churning out bills from a giant machine. Instead, it involves buying assets using self-generated money, such as mortgage-backed securities and Treasury bonds. Mortgage-backed securities resemble bundles of loans for home purchases. Picture banks extending loans to numerous individuals to buy homes. These loans get bundled and sold as packages to investors, including the Federal Reserve. Consequently, those indebted to banks for these loans are now indebted to the Federal Reserve, which bought these loans from the banks. These acquisitions swell its portfolio, filled with financial assets. Why do they do this? Well, one aspect the Federal Reserve aims to control is inflation, when prices hike too swiftly. It also endeavors to maintain interest rates. When the Fed procures more assets, augmenting its portfolio, it infuses more money into the economy, termed quantitative easing. From early 2020 to March 2022, the Federal Reserve heavily engaged in this quantitative easing owing to the pandemic. It acquired a significant volume of bonds and assets to buoy the economy amid trying times. However, here's the crux. When the Federal Reserve purchases assets like mortgage-backed securities or government bonds, they employ self-generated money. It's a peculiar process. When they claim to circulate money into the economy, it doesn't involve printing physical bills but generating digital money. It's akin to adding digits to their bank accounts without sourcing it elsewhere. This newly created money is used to procure the mentioned assets, effectively injecting more money into the economy, aiding its growth. However, the twist lies in this. At some point, the Federal Reserve had to cease these actions and sell the acquired assets, a process termed quantitative tightening. Selling these assets withdraws money from the economy, potentially slowing its movement. But here's the crux: they incurred losses with these sales. Why? The Federal Reserve's debt mainly concerns bank reserves held in the Federal Reserve by commercial banks. In essence, banks deposit money in specialized accounts within the Federal Reserve, labeled bank reserves. In return, the Federal Reserve pays interest to banks for maintaining these reserves. This fosters bank incentives to retain a certain sum with the Federal Reserve, bolstering financial stability and liquidity in case of crises, ensuring banks don't lend out all the money. By the second quarter of 2023, they held around $5.5 trillion in government bonds yielding 2% and $2.6 trillion in mortgage-backed loans yielding 2.2%. However, they offered banks a 5% return for depositing money in the Federal Reserve. So, in essence, they spent more than they earned. In the first half of the year, they garnered $88.4 billion in income but had to pay $141.8 billion in interest. This led to roughly $53 billion in losses by the year's midpoint. If this trend persists, their losses could double by year-end. Now, why does all this matter? Well, here arises another crucial aspect. When the Federal Reserve ends a year with more money than spent, that surplus funds go to the U.S. Treasury. The Treasury shoulders the responsibility of repaying the national debt. If the Federal Reserve ends with less money than spent, as it currently experiences, it doesn't remit anything or might even receive funds from the Treasury. This poses an issue because the national debt in the U.S. has historically remained high, especially post-economic crises or wars. For instance, a dramatic surge was witnessed in the late 2000s following the global financial crisis, and another during the coronavirus pandemic. What are the implications for our economy? This is vital because when the Treasury has limited funds, it hampers the government's ability to finance vital programs like retirement benefits, Social Security, infrastructural development such as roads and bridges, and investing in the country's future. Public debt is akin to a legacy left for future generations, akin to how we care about the environment and inherited infrastructure from past generations. When the government faces reduced funds due to Federal Reserve losses, it forces a dilemma of two choices. The first involves borrowing more money, precisely the current scenario. Yet, this solution exacerbates long-term issues rather than resolving them. The second option entails hiking taxes for all, an unpopular move often evaded by governments and citizens alike. No one desires increased taxes, yet it serves as an avenue for additional government revenue. The critical issue here is the government perpetually accumulating debt instead of utilizing borrowed funds for long-term beneficial investments, like improving education or infrastructure. Sometimes, it merely spends on assistance programs, trips, conferences, office supplies, devoid of considering the future. This is where discrepancies arise. Economists differ on how to manage national debt. Some believe in repaying to avert future problems, while others deem it less severe. Truthfully, debt isn't inherently detrimental, as exhibited by countries like Japan, accumulating substantial debt over extended periods. Despite the towering debt, Japan possesses a substantial sum compared to the pace of its economic growth. To maintain control, the Japanese government adopted an intriguing approach, plummeting interest rates nearly to zero. One might assume excessive debt and low interest rates could spawn inflation due to surplus money and increased buying power. Yet, this hasn't transpired in Japan. Hence, the question arises, why do Japan and the United States, with similar debt situations, witness contrasting outcomes? Economists propose various theories. One theory involves Japan's aging population compared to the more youthful, workforce-driven economy of the US. Additionally, disparities in immigration policies and money management strategies between the nations contribute to these distinctions. The US historically benefited from immigrant labor, whereas Japan restricts immigration. Consequently, the demand for goods and services may be less dynamic. Fewer young individuals entering the workforce, contributing to lower demand for products and services, keeps inflation in check or may even lead to deflation, a widespread price decline. I hope you liked the video, and if you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon!